Right, so we're continuing with the second part of the use of MultiMC for your favourite Minecraft games on using Dropbox as the source and on multiple operating systems. So one thing I forgot to show on the last video was how to create a shortcut to MultiMC within the Dropbox folder. If you've installed it from the normal place, it will appear in Games under MultiMC. So if I do the properties on there, you'll see that it's currently pointing to opt MultiMC run sh. So we want to change that now to a version inside here. So if we press the browse button and then go to the Dropbox terminal, so Dropbox MultiMC, and then it should be down here somewhere, MultiMC, OK, just stretch that out a bit so you can see where it is. There we go. So we've got the same shortcut, but we've changed the location. It's ticked, so it recognizes this as an executable file. This is a virtual machine, so I don't really need to use dedicated GPU, but you can certainly tick that if you wish. Press OK. We'll just close this off, and we should now be able to launch it from the original shortcut, which is in Games. Let me just test that. Yes, there we go. That's what's running. What also might be useful is to go back to that one, right click and add to desktop. So we've now got a version up here. So that was the first thing to do. Now when you run it, if you run this on a Windows machine, it's going to change the settings. Just to give you an example, if I choose 2612, edit instance and then settings, you'll see that I have previously run this on the Windows virtual machine, and so the Java here is Java Windows javaw.exe. So we're currently on a Mint virtual machine, so we can manually change that by looking in the Java. This is 26.1, so it uses Linux, Epsilon, bin, and Java, if I can find it. There it is. So that's the correct version. You can test it. Yep, that works. And close. So that will now launch. Same with this other one. Edit the instance, settings. You'll see that the Java setting is wrong here. So again, we'd have to browse for it. This would be Linux, and this one is the beta version, bin, and then Java again. Open, test, that's working. And of course the config for this folder itself, if we can go to general settings, I believe it is, and then Java, it's just put Java in there at the moment, but it's stored. If I can go back to Dropbox here, open Dropbox folder, MultiMC, it's actually stored in multimc.cfg. If I open it with text editor, you'll see that the Java path is just a straightforward Java, which is using the default system-wide Java. So it might be wise to change that as well, so which we can do if we go to the settings, Java, and then browse for it, and this time we'll set it this time specifically to Java, Linux, epsilon, bin, and Java. Open. There we are. We've now got the full path. Close. We can now close that one off. And again, if we double check the config file, we've now got it open in the Java path is now the full Java Linux, Java runtime, epsilon. So that's what you have to do when you change operating systems, which is okay, but it's a bit long-winded. So ideally, especially if you've got lots of games, we want to be able to change the paths automatically. So I've written a Python script which will do just that. So I started the Windows virtual machine and opened Wing here, which is what I like to use for Python development. So I'm just going to run this so you can see what happens. So the Python script here checks in a database for the current paths that have been set up for MultiMC, checks the settings and checks each of the game instances. So because I had set the game to run from Linux, the 1.8 config file has been changed, the Java path, from the Linux Java runtime to Windows Java runtime. And so has the 2612 game been changed from Linux epsilon to Windows epsilon. And check that by running the DB browser. So again, if I just go to the Dropbox here, MultiMC, config switcher, Java path database, and browse. Okay, so the records, the config for the program itself using the epsilon version with Windows Java WXC for the Java Windows, and for the Java Linux we've got the Linux equivalent. So this is the database that holds all the information. Now the more Minecraft games that you have, the longer this list would become. But the important thing is that you have to manually set them first of all, so that you select the right version of Java. This program can't work it out for you. You have to manually do it the first time round, and every time you add a new game, you have to just add these paths manually. So then this will set it up and do the job for you. So if I just press enter to quit on this one, and that one goes. So we'll show you how this all works. So what you do in your Dropbox folder in MultiMC is you add another folder called config switcher. Here it is. You don't have to spell it like this. You could even call it something else, but config switcher is what I've called it. And then inside there, all you'll need to add are these two files, database.py and main.py. The database itself is created automatically for you. So here's the GitHub page. It's on. So there are two files here. There's the main.py, which is the one I was showing you a moment ago, and then there's the database.py, which is the one that deals with all the database. And probably more useful for you, there is a PDF file which goes through everything that I've covered in the last video and this one on how to do everything I've shown you here. Right down, there's more pages which you can do. When you download the PDF, you get everything there, and that will give you all you need to know. So let me get that one out of the way. So it also includes instructions on what to do with it. But so if you've now got MultiMC, you've added a new folder called config switcher. All you need to put in it is the database.py and the main.py. if you're running this from Windows, then you should be able to just double click main.py and it will run. So let me do that now and just test it. This will of course run outside of Wing. It'll just let's just do that one. Okay, so it's run directly from Windows, checking as it doesn't need to make any changes. Everything's ready to go. I've left it so that you press enter to quit this because I tried to make it so that when it's finished converting and doing all the settings, it would then launch MultiMC, but I couldn't do it without the terminal, or in this case the Windows command shell, staying open and reporting on all the stuff that MultiMC was doing. So it was just easier to say enter to quit, then you can start MultiMC. So if I go back up one level, we're now on MultiMC. Because we're on Windows, we don't use that one, we use this one. It's looking for Java, browse, then we want the Java, Windows, Epsilon, bin, Java W. It's ticked, finish, that's ready to go. So we're now running it nicely on Windows. And if I check any of the settings in here, they should now automatically be on the Windows path, which they are. So I won't bother to run these, but it will now run normally. So what we'll do next is I'll switch back to the Linux VM. So I'm just waiting to make sure that Dropbox has done its job, which it has. Now if we run it this time, it should come up with the notifications that everything's being changed. So if we hit start there we go. Let's bring that one out a bit if we can. There we go. So it's checking the database, which of course was synchronized through Dropbox. The program settings and the game instances, so it's changing the instances from Windows to Linux. Now in the Java path, in Linux, they are, yes. So that's actually worked. So that's how to set it up. Just put the two files in. Now, I'll get that out of the way. What we don't have on Linux is a quick way of making a shortcut to the Python file here. Now the way to do that is inside the config switcher file. I'm going to mimic what I did here. So right click and then create new document, empty document, and then call it, I'm doing something very similar. Let's just call it switch rather than switcher. So we give it the sh suffix. So we've got switcher, which was the original 1 byte, and switcher, which is the one I've set up. Then once you've created it, open that with the text editor. And of course, at the moment, it's completely empty. So cd, of course, change directory. And then you put in the folder which we're in. So if I go up to here, there we are, look, home user Dropbox. So if I copy that, place that in there, good, and then don't forget to, that's the directory, of course, so we don't need to do any more. That changes the directory to home user Dropbox, MultiMC config switcher, or of course, whatever you happen to call your one here. And then to actually launch this Python script, which is called main, then you use Python 3 space and then main.py. Oops, helps if you spell Python correctly. So Python 3 main.py, and that then should work. So we'll close that and save it, of course. And now that should run, if I can get this out of the way, the same way as it did when we ran it from Wing. So if I double click that, oops. What I haven't done, of course, is to right click, Properties, Permissions, Allow Executing as a Program. So I was going to edit that bit out, but I thought, this is typical of a Windows user moving to Linux. You forget to do that. Now, with a bit of luck, yes, we now want to run it. So we'll run it in terminal, and it does that. Now, that's all very well and good, but it's a bit of a nuisance having to, every time you want to run it, do you want to, yeah, right. So now what we can do is to create a shortcut on the desktop to run this shell file here. Is to right click on the desktop and then create a new launcher here. Browse for your Dropbox, MultiMC, where are we? Config switcher, and then switch. That's what we're going to be using. It's accepted that. Let's call it, I'll just call it switcher. Doesn't matter. Don't need a comment, but you can put one in if you want. Again, you can tick these two. The icon here is boring, so if you click on that one and then do a search for Python, then you can use, they're all the same. Let's use applications Python. So you've now got a shortcut with the Python elements. It runs your script sh here. Press OK. Would you like to add this to the menu also? Yep, we'll do that. And now it's on the desktop, and there we are. It runs without asking you what you want to do. So that's the way to do it in Linux. I've done it probably very clumsily, and you Linux experts will be laughing your heads off thinking, yeah, right. But remember, I only started using Linux about 2 weeks ago, so I'm still very much a learner. Right, so now we've got that showing you how it all works, we'll go back to the code and we can explore how that works. So this is the bit that gets into the technical stuff, so that may well be enough for most of you. So we're ready to continue. So let's go through how this works. So it runs from main, which is this command here, but before we do that, I've got some imports here that work both on Linux and Windows to make a coloured output, as you saw, and it's using a library called Colorama. Now this bit here, from here right the way down to here, is a way to try and import Colorama automatically if it's not already in the system, so that this will try and import Colorama. If it fails because it's not there, then it uses the subprocess to call Python itself using the -m pip install Colorama. On Linux this works beautifully, and it just loads it in, runs and continues. It fails on Windows in that once it gets to the finally import Colorama, it errors. So you switch it off and run it again, and then it works. So it does actually import Colorama, but for some reason it won't work from here. But anyway, it's easy enough to fix. So the Colorama gives you the opportunity to change the forecolor, back color, and the style of your text on a console. OS name is used to find out if it's NT, that means you're running on Windows, and if it's POSIX, P-O-S-I-X, then you're running on Linux. If you're on Windows, then you import a console fix, which makes this run on Windows in exactly the same way. So that's the imports there. I'll come back to these as and when we use them. So go to main. So I've called this central control as a kind of a joke, really. That's basically what it does. So we set the name of the database, which is javapath.db, and then we're calling the open database function up here, passing in the DB name, which is here javapath.db. So what that does is to print checking for the database, and then if the path name that we've given it is a file, then it will print creating the database, and then it'll open it if it doesn't exist. So we're then using the database.py file onto the create one. So it's all very well documented, so you should be able to follow this quite easily. We're using a global pair of variables here, con and cursor, which are fairly standard. And this SQL statement that actually creates the database is this one here. So if we're creating a table called game with an ID integer primary key, which auto increments, so you don't have to manually change or give the primary key. You just add another record and it does it on its own. And then we've got 3 fields. We've got name, Java Windows, and Java Linux. So it's just the 3 fields that you saw earlier. And then using inside of with statements to create the database. And then we're going to put a default row in first, which is based on the config, multimc.config, with an empty Java path for Windows and an empty Java path for Linux. So we're inserting row using this function here. So that will insert the row. So this is a generic one, which is useful if you're playing about with databases. You can add this to your project. And then so you give the field names as a list, you give the data values as a list, and then you add them by inserting into the table name the field names and the data values. And then you execute the query, commit it, and then return the last row ID, which means once you have added a row to the database, whatever the ID number of that row is returned to the field that called insert row. So that creates your database. And then the next thing to do is to update the settings from the config file. So if we go to update settings, let's minimize these. So these are the MultiMC.cfg settings, and the only one we're interested in is this one down here, which is the Java path. So we don't need to touch any of the others here, just need to change that Java path. So if I minimize that and we bring back Wing. So the config file that we're going to look at specifically is the ... means use the folder immediately above where we are. We're currently in the config switcher or switcher config folder, so we need the one above it, and then that's where that one is found. So the double dots will do that for us. And then we're going to call another function here, which is get file data. So the config file multimc.cfg with a false flag. So we'll now go up to get file data. I'll show you how that works. Now the with name means, do we want to return the name of the file, or no we don't, because we already know it. so we're not going to do that. Now, this Python programmers may or may not be familiar with is using functions within a function. So these are sub-functions which are purely local to this get file data. You can't access them from anywhere else in your Python code, so that's only used within here. So we've got a get name and a get Java path function. So we'll just drop those down a little bit. So when this one is called, it passes the config file, which in this case is multimc.cfg, and then we set some variables to empty strings, and then we're going to open that file in read-only condition. And then the next thing we're going to do is to strip off the new line characters at the end of it. So this is this Python comprehension, and that gets rid of the new line characters and gives you a Python list with every single line that was within that file is then included in it. Then we're going to go through each line in that list, and if we've not already found the Java path, which of course was set empty here, then we're going to look for it in using the get Java path, which of course is this little sub-function up here. And this will take the line that we're sending it. If it's an empty line, it's highly unlikely that it will be, but it will just return two empty strings. And then, assuming it's not empty, it will split the line on the equals. So if I just bring back the file, let's go back to Open with Text Editor again. So we've got, for example here, Java path equals Java Linux, blah, blah, blah. So what we're doing here is that we are splitting the line into Java path and the actual path. So if we go back, so if the first part, which is part 0, equals Java path, we know we've got the right line. Then we're going to check whether in the second part, which is the Java path, if it's got the word or the suffix .exe in it, we know it's a Windows file because you don't get those in Linux. So if we've got .exe in the Java path itself, we know it's an NT, a Windows version. If it's not there, it's a POSIX one. And then we're going to return from this little mini function the two parts, the Java path and the NT or POSIX. So we return that back down here. So we've now found the Java path, and so if it's we then move on to the next set of lines. So assuming we've found the Java path, then the next time it runs, if the Java path is a real value and not equal, the else thing will fire. If you're not looking for the name, you close the file and return the set of lines, the Java path and the OS type. If we are looking for the name, then we can get the name from this other function here, get name. So this is when we're looking in the settings for each game, because we do then, in those ones, we do have a name equals, which will be the name of the game. So we want to get that. So this one function deals with both the config file for the MultiMC itself and for the individual config files for each of the games. So coming back to where we were, we're checking, we're getting the data that we want from the get file data, which is all the lines that made up the file, the Java path as recorded in the config file, the OS type as well, whether it's NT or POSIX. Now, if the Java path returns an empty string, then it means it hasn't been set. So you need to run your MultiMC and set the path for everything first. what might have been worth checking was whether it was just equal to Java on its own, in which case that would again maybe signal that we should have changed it. But anyway, that's a possible thing I can go out with. So we've now got some data, and now we need to get a bit more data. We're going to look in the database for the record ID, whether we need to update the config, whether we need to update the database, the Windows path, and the Linux path from the database itself. So we're going to get the database record for MultiMC's config, the OS type config Java path. So if we go back to get DB record, there it is. So we set some values to defaults here, and then we're using the database module, database.findRow, and the name. So we're going to pass in MultiMC.cfg at this state. Then we go back to database, and then this time we're looking to find the row. So we pass the name, and then we just use the SQL statement execute select the fields that we want, the ID, the name, the Windows, the Linux from the game, where the name equals whatever name we have passed in this case MultiMC.cfg, and then fetch all, and that's returned. So it's a relatively straightforward one there. So we've asked the database, what have we got? If there's no record, then you get an empty list, and therefore we need to update the database because it's empty. Else we have therefore got a record, and the list that is returned is a list of tuples, and each tuple contains the ID, the Windows path, the POSIX path, and the name. So it contains 4 values. So the record ID is in the first index of the first list, and so on. So we've got the NT path, which is number 2, and the POSIX path number 3. Then we're going to check through whether the depending on the OS type, what we need to do here. So this gives you, it's all very well laid out here and commented, so it should show you how it all works. And then from that we'll know whether we've got to update the database if it's been set to true, and update the config file. And so we return the record ID, which will be -1 if there is no record, and then update config will be true or false, update DB will be true or false, the net path, the Windows path, and the Linux path, which could of course be empty. There could be empty strings. So that is returned to the update settings here. And then we do a final check once we've got all that data to see, we set initially that this new variable Java path, which has not been used before, is set initially to the whatever the config file had in its Java path. Then we're checking, depending on the operating system that we're using, whether the Java path that is stored in the database, it can be changed to either NT or POSIX as appropriate, so that we've then got this the config Java path as one variable, and then we've got the Java path that we want to change it to in another. Final check to see that it's not empty if we're updating the database, and then we update the record again, using as it is in this case the MultiMC, because this is our update settings. The lines that we extracted from the file, and then the Java path. I've used strip to make sure that any accidental spaces that were put in at the front or end of the file name are stripped off. I did have an error on an earlier iteration because of that. So that then updates the settings. The rest of it is very similar. So we're going through each of the, if I go to main, once we've done the settings, we're then going to go for each, we're going to iterate the directory of the instances, which if I go back to here and we go to instances, we've got this of course is not the virtual machine I was showing you. This is my real machine. So this is showing all the instances that I've got set up and all their names. So the earliest I've got is 112.2. So if I show you the config for that one, open with text editor. So this one uses, where's the Java path here? That's the legacy version of Java. The reason I had a copy here is because during testing it would sometimes trash the instance config completely. So this was my way of making sure that I didn't have to go through the whole process again. I could just copy them back, but I can actually delete that now because it's all running well. So I think that's as far as I need to go with the explanation. It's, as I say, well commented. You should be able to understand it. I did try here to launch the MultiMC itself, but it was a complete waste of time. So I've left the code in there for you to look at. If anybody can get it running without it continuing to run in the terminal, I'd be most grateful. Just leave a comment below or go onto the GitHub and comment there. So I think that's it. Enjoy.